Democratic Socialists. They just came out a week ago with a platform at some gathering that they had, so it's right there for us to see. They want to actually replace or fundamentally restructure it. I think that at the core, if you're a Democrat, and if at the core, if you're like one of these Democratic Socialists, you have there's a common thread that you have a commitment to social justice. Their economic philosophies may be the same, but they may not. And the manner in which the country would be governed, I think, diverges significantly. For example, a traditional Democrat views the free market as the primary driver of economic growth, but believes there has to be government regulation. Democratic Socialists take it further. They argue that capitalism is inherently exploitive. It's right there in the Democratic Socialists of America platform, which you can see. Go to dsa.org, I think is where it is. It calls for putting large corporations under public ownership. It calls for establishing state-run entities like publicly owned grocery stores, such as the one that Mamdani is attempting to institute here in New York City. You know, it's interesting because grocery stores, and we all know there's a pinch there, but grocery stores operate on a very narrow margin. They are generally not exploitative, especially in communities where there is competition. So there are concerns among the grocery store owners. They may be put out of business. Fine, the Democratic Socialists would say, because capitalism is not properly serving the community. So there's a big difference there. There's a difference in their health care and social safety net approaches. The traditional Democrats are big supporters of the Affordable Care Act. They want to lower prescription costs. They want to introduce a government-run public option, but alongside private insurance, the Democratic Socialists want to eliminate completely private health insurance in favor of a single-payer government-run Medicare for all type system. This is a very populist approach by the Democratic Socialists, no question. When it comes to labor and wages, there are some differences. The traditional Democrats might support a federal minimum wage, but the Democratic Socialists would like double the amount of money that people would be guaranteed. There's differences when it comes to foreign policy and defense. There's differences within electoral reform. You can read it all. I don't want to get into all the nuances. So the Republicans, of course, are seizing on all of this populist movement. And they're sometimes painting with a wide brush and interchanging the terms socialism and communism. And I think that's very emotive on their part, without question. And while we know that there are major differences in the definition between socialism and communism, if you read that platform, which is embraced by the AOCs of the world, she's on the stump along with Senator Sanders, supporting these candidates. There are overlaps. You know, I've discussed how traditional Democrats want to reform capitalism. Well, both the Democratic Socialists and Communists, I think, share a baseline belief that capitalism is inherently exploitive. Or is it exploitative? I've heard it pronounced both ways. And should be entirely replaced. I've always thought that if you're going to eliminate capitalism, that's a communist philosophy. Both the Democratic Socialists and the Communists believe in collective ownerships. of large industries and utilities. Things like that. So there are overlaps. So the question here is, and I don't think it's happening yet, if you look at the number of democratic socialists or people who support their philosophies, it's a minute number of people within the Democratic Party. But I think when you look at this poll today, we would be remiss not to consider the possibility that there is a shift going on in the Democratic Party. Now, we know that oftentimes small changes start with big bravado proposals. So because the Democratic Party has this big tent philosophy, there might be some accommodations and things might just inch in a direction that many people may find palatable. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the words that come out of the mouths of these folks and what is published in their platform is anything close to what might occur with the Democratic Party. But you know, there were those who scoffed when the Tea Party was formed, which was a precursor to what we now know as MAGA. And they controlled, right now, the Republican Party. So there was a major shift in the Republican Party where traditional conservatives are on the outside looking in. Cynthia McCain, and one would argue that Cynthia McCain and her husband were Republican royalty, is actively campaigning for a Democratic candidate in Arizona right now. So that shows that there is a major schism in the Republican Party. I think it's prudent for us to discuss today whether the Democrats are making a shift within their party not dissimilar to that the Republicans made in a different direction. And I think it would be interesting to explore how this might affect elections, even in the short term. Because we know the Republican pundits are seizing upon this, and they're trying to scare the bejeebers out of voters as we approach the midterm elections. And hey, your job, if you're a party operative, is to, by whatever means necessary, convince people to vote your way. So just because they say that there's going to be a major shift to the left, or there is one in the Democratic Party, doesn't necessarily mean it's true, but it could be an effective means of campaigning. So all of this might affect campaigns as we approach November. I don't know, but it's something to consider, and certainly it's something the Republicans have considered because they're exploiting it. And I use exploiting not in a negative sense. They're seizing an opportunity here. So with that, I will open it up to y'all. I don't know whether Alan is with us on this or not. Alan?
Yes, I am, sir. How are you?
Okay, Alan, followed by Scott.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Gary. As usual, it's perfect. Let me take the opportunity here. I cannot figure out how to tell hello to Liz. She comes in here quiet, she leaves. But anyway, back to the topic. I don't think so, Gary. It's a shift in Democratic Party. Democratic Party got pregnant, but the wrong idea because they were more adapted to the different idea. Republican, these are all my own opinion. Nobody doesn't attach to anything. This is my intakes is after living 50 years in the United States, seeing a good glory days, and now I'm seeing it more and more. It bring to my mind a friend of mine went to Iran, he got married, brought his wife here. In the week which I saw her, she told me this. She says, I see the future of United States. It's going to be just as bad as Iran. I don't know how she comes in with that. I was laughing at her back then. I said, there is no way, but unfortunately, I see it is going that direction. And not that extent, but it's going that direction. These new, which there is a part is growing inside the Democratic, they call themselves Social Democratic. These people have a very, very dark plan for the United States. That's, take my words. I don't have any way to prove it to you, but this experience, the knowledge I have, it gave me this indication. The four, especially in the Congress, they are bound to bring these great nation down. There is nothing in it. Mamaduni in it, I don't know what he has proved, what he has done in New York to prove. This guy is the enemy within, and no one else. Chuck Schumer is another enemy within. I always believe no one has the guts to attack us from outside. No one. But they send the enemy to grow under our skin, and they going in. So be aware of these. Baby, it's inside the belly of Democrat, and it's growing. And when it's a monster, it's gonna pop out, and only God can save us. Back.
Thank you, Alan, and it's always great, to hear from a perspective of somebody who has seen similar changes in their home countries. That's the beauty of our gatherings here. We get so many different perspectives. Thank you, Alan. We'll go to Scott, followed by...
Yeah, Gary. Hey, nice to talk to everybody. I'm on the stationary bike right now because 1 Timothy 4:8, the Apostle Paul says physical training is of some value. So I'm reading scriptures today. Multitasking. No, I mean, look, I think ultimately the Democratic Party is certainly taking a turn left on cultural issues. Where this is where people like Bill Maher and many others will say the new religion is wokeism and woke this and woke that. And look, I'm not unsympathetic to these criticisms of my own party. I am probably more of a cultural traditionalist. I don't know if that's the religion in me or what, but so yeah, I'm sensitive to that. I don't think we are in danger of seriously moving left on economic issues. I don't think the party, on the whole, is much different than it was in 2016 on economic issues. You still can't get that 65% of Americans want Medicare for all. You can say that's good, you can say that's bad, you can say it's affordable, you can say it's not affordable. This is a winning issue. I don't know why every Democrat doesn't say, how often do you get a 65% issue? And the majority of Democrats aren't saying, hey, Medicare's for all, why don't the Republicans want it? It's a winning issue, because insurance companies donate to both parties. So I don't know that look at how much Wall Street money people like Kamala Harris was taking. Who was in her ear at the, running up to in the 100 days? Mark Cuban saying she's too tough on billionaires. And she listened. I don't think that this is the mainstream Democratic Party is just going to go that far left. I just don't. First off, we're too anti-tax for that. I mean, I think if we wanted to even move in a Scandinavian model, right, which is thoroughly capitalistic, in some ways more libertarian economically than we are. Rand Paul has a new movie out where it's a documentary about socialism, and it has the prime minister of Denmark basically on the film telling Bernie Sanders to stop saying Denmark's socialist, because it's not. It's thoroughly capitalist. It just has a generous safety net, right? And you get things like free college. But people pay for that, right? I mean, the average Scandinavian, it's not like here where, Mitt Romney said 48% of people pay most of the taxes. It's still a progressive system there, but working class people and middle class people pay a lot more taxes in Scandinavia. And arguably they get more for it, right? But we're just not going to do that, right? We are not going to do that in this country. We are too libertarian. We are founded on the tax rebellion. We don't like taxes unless billionaires are paying them. And I'm not saying billionaires shouldn't pay them. I'm for progressive tax, severely progressive. I remember when Mitt Romney said, when people doubted his conservative credentials in 2012, he said, I was a severely conservative governor. I don't know how many presidential candidates used the word severely like that. He also was a kid, had a penchant for using the term marvelous, which means candidates don't use. But yeah, I don't think that we're in danger of that on the whole. I think that, now look, I mean, we are in a populist moment, right? And populism is taking grip on the left and the right. What do populists have in common? They're both, on the left and the right, they're both anti-establishment, right? They blame the ruling class. They often reject the establishment experts, although I think the populist right rejects expertise a little more than the populist left, but not really. I mean, it's just differently, right? What the populist right will say they're elites, the populist left will say it's all racist or gender-based, or they'll have, and some of these are legitimate critiques, but they'll have different reasons for rejecting expertise. They'll often both have like savior figures, charismatic figures. I think the populist right has that more than the populist left in Trump. The populist left really doesn't have that. I don't know that Mamdani will be that. Both the left and the right. Look at the populism on the left and the right now. It's us versus them. There's a good guy and the bad guy, right? As opposed to non-populist, right of center and left of center politics, where you have people that are not populist, like Wes Moore and who's the governor from Utah? I can't think of his name now. But these guys get together. They don't play us versus them, right? But on the populist side, on left and right, it's us versus them. Both of them have a crisis mindset, right? The sky's falling. Both tend towards reductive, simplistic, answers. But the difference is, the key difference, I think, between left-wing and right-wing populism, we're seeing in the DSA versus sort of the Christian nationalist sort of Trump populism, is for the left-wing, at least this used to be true. Now, I think identity politics is changing this a little bit. But at least traditionally, left-wing populism, I think of Bernie Sanders as the archetype of this, defines people by their economic class. You're either in the working class, or the 99% versus the billionaires. Right-wing populism doesn't tend to talk that classist. It tends to find people by national signifiers or cultural or ethnic identity, or the native born American or citizen versus the immigrant and the outsider. But they have a lot in common. So I think, I think that I just don't think that left-wing populism can catch on as much in the Democratic Party because it's becoming the party of the elite, right? It's funny that Trump wants to take away, the whole SAVE Act, right? Well, more Democrats have passports than Republicans, right? And the states that are lowest in passport possession are all red states, and the states that are highest, the cosmopolitan jet setters, they're all blue states. So I think when you have this elite class, the educated elite, who, Trump is now winning. People, Trump won in 2020 for the first time, Republican, in, oh God, I don't know how long, won people making under $50,000 a year. Well, Democrats are becoming the party of the wealthy elite. And I don't think those people tend to go for socialism. Now again, they'll be for social programs, right? But the limousine liberals in New York and LA, they want their shit. And they're not gonna, I don't think the party is gonna let the DSA that far off the leash, right? Again, Marshall spoke of this. You might get some election victories in deep blue districts, right? Like in Mamdani or somebody. But some of this too is so cultural. Look at how much the friggin' DSA. I bet you the average Democratic Socialist talked more about cops and Palestine. Oh my God, Palestine! You heard more about Palestine and Israel than you did about Marx, Engels, or socialism, or socialism as a transitional state to classless society, or anything like this.
Well, clearly, Mamdani is obsessed on this issue, isn't he?
Yes, and so was the woman in Colorado. So, I mean, look, this is very different than a Bernie Sanders, who represents a kind of more classic socialism that sees race and ethnic divisions and things like this as a tool of the elite to pit the working class against each other. So that's just interesting. I I'm not dismissing that there's left-wing populism out there, and that it's, but I just don't think it's going to take over the Democratic Party because somebody's got to pay for shit. Somebody's got to pay for lawn signs and expensive Facebook ads and TV time, stuff like that. And it's not going to be the bohemian people that smell like petroleum oil. And Abby knows these people in West Philly. Thank God Abby is further across the river from them than I am. But it's not going to, these people are not going to pay for campaigns that you need to wage at any significant level. So I don't think it's taking a hard turn, but the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So I mean, I think that's and then part of the reason I think people respect the DSA is they say, something like some of the right-wing populists. I think part of the reason people like Donald Trump is, whether you like him personally or not, people have this perception that he gets up there, he'll just say things unfiltered, and that he's not bullshitting and playing political games. I think people have this sense of the DSA, right? That these people mean what they say what they mean, and they're not going to mute it, and they're not going to sort of modulate, and they're going to try to get elected and do this shit. And I think people respect that. So, but again, I don't think your average Democrat is for socialism. And again, there's huge differences in socialism and communism, largely because in socialism you still have private property, and you still have space for a doctor to make more than a teacher. You don't have that in communism, right? Each according to his ability, and each according to his needs. So you work according to your ability, and then that's redistributed according to need. So it's not. I mean, there's pretty big differences, I think, between communism and socialism. But there you go, Gary. I've rambled on, and Abby can testify to these petroleum oil people in West Philly. So thanks.
So I think it's interesting you point out correctly that thus far the democratic socialist philosophy is taking hold in areas where there's already a progressive base. But we are going to see people who run on similar platforms in areas that are atypical with regard to folks getting elected who have progressive philosophies. And I think that will be a better barometer, don't you, Scott? If they don't resonate and don't get elected in those, heartland districts, then perhaps your assessment is spot on. But if some of them do get elected, would that not be an indication of a significant shift in the public perception of government?
Yeah, I think so. And Abby can speak to this, my buddy. But here in Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, if he doesn't get primary, because he's not popular with the Democrats, but he's above water with Republicans, right? I mean, I think if he doesn't get primary, out of spite, John Fetterman could easily get reelected. They don't get beat through a lot of Republican hoods. I don't think you put a DSA person or even somebody DSA adjacent, if they manage to beat Fetterman, they would lose by about I'll let Abby Marsh bank it out by about 2,000% in Pennsylvania. It doesn't play in Pittsburgh or even suburban Philadelphia. Again, maybe in West Philadelphia with the petroleum oil, but I don't think the appeal is beyond it.
So is West Philly like the Upper West Side of Manhattan?
It's sort of the hippy dippy people that are not as into grooming as the rest of us. And you find some Marxists. There's a Marxist anarchist.
Well, maybe they're more like sections of Brooklyn than they are on the Upper West Side. Gotcha. Not familiar. Maybe I should take a trip out there to check it out. Thank you, Scott. We'll go to Abby, followed by Chip.
Okay, so a quick understanding of West Philly. It's where University of Pennsylvania is, and also somewhat Drexel. And so it's attracted a lot of intellectuals over the years, but I wouldn't liken it to the west side of New York. And actually, in the Jewish community, we're dealing with a very bad renegade temple that's there, with a rabbi that is anti-Israel, very, very strongly so.
Are these the Reconstructionists, Abby?
And yeah, I can't even, I'll start to get upset if I start talking about it. I mean, it's got the whole community whacked. But not to talk about West Philly, but I agree with Scott. Fetterman probably will get primary. The question is whether he'll run as an independent or stay, as a Democrat. And I agree with Scott in that state. I don't see a DSA person taking control. I did want to, you're going to be shocked that I'm going to talk about this, but I actually wanted to point out, as a Republican, I wanted to point out the good Democrats. And the Democrats, and I wish there were more, and that's the point I want to make, of the 15 members of Congress that signed a pledge, and it was called the Promise to America. It was put together by Tom Suozzi and Adam Gray. There were several issues. I mean, there's the signatories, you can Google and read them. Josh Gottheimer was a signatory. My congresswoman was a signatory. And it was a statement from moderate Democrats. Basically, you can read it. It's not that long. I'll put it in the chat. But it was capitalism over socialism, and fostering a more competitive economy, safety and secure borders, and talking about having a proper immigration system and safe borders, fiscal responsibility, and free speech, but in embracing moderation and democratic pluralism, and rejecting political extremism. It goes on with other subjects in the Pledge to America. I think what's important is to see that it was only 15 members of Congress that signed this, and many might have been concerned in their re-elections how things will be perceived. I do agree that the Israel-Palestine issue has become so front and center, and I agree with also and I'm thinking about what you just said, Gary, because places like Michigan are really going to be the litmus test, not a district in Colorado that's a plus 50D district, but more so the state of Michigan, and to see how someone like Haley Stevens, who is a moderate Dem, is going to play out against a DSA very, very strong proponent against Israel, and making that subject front and center for the DSA. I live in a state that our federal representatives, but for one, are all Democrats. Our 2 senators and our members of Congress, they are all moderates. And the DSA at one point took over our state party. At that time, one of our senators was up for re-election. She pulled her money out of the state party and said she wanted no connection with it whatsoever. Basically, all the federal representatives pulled away from the DSA-controlled state organization until finally they voted those people out. And as a result of voting them out, the state Democratic Party reflected more what the representatives are like. So, and again, that's in Nevada and what happened here. But there are pockets and areas that it has taken over, and it's of great concern. I mean, even in our state, there's a few that got through in the primary, and we're going to have to deal with them in the general. From a Republican standpoint, I mean, some Republicans see it as a gift because they see it as an easy win against these policies, especially the very extreme ones that believe in no military, no police, no prisons. I mean, you go through the list of some of these positions that they've taken, and it may bode well in those areas in Manhattan or in Colorado, or even where Rab won in the West Philly, but it won't bode well, I think, nationally and in the middle of the country. I don't see it. What's going to be interesting, and I don't know, someone is going to have to help me when this election is, the Cori Bush, Wesley Bell election, which is also going to be a test in St. Louis as to whether someone who's DSA running solely on the issue of the Jews and Israel will be I don't even know if I call him a moderate.
August 4th. I just looked it up. August 4th.
Yeah. So I think that's also going to be a test of it. I think you really have to look around the country at these primaries in the more central part of the country. But, you know, from the Republican standpoint, on those races, it's in, you know, where it's not a D plus 12, but it's a more competitive, you know, battleground race, it will work well for the Republicans. I just, you know, there are these moderate Dems. Many Republicans will support them and will support their elections. Someone like Richie Torres, we write checks to and we support. And, you know, we hope for more of them. We hope that those voices are loud in the Democratic caucus. And for the senators also, I mean, I'm very proud of my two Democrat senators that stood out on that Bernie Sanders vote and, you know, are moderates. So that's sort of a perspective from a Republican slash I like a good Democrat voter on this. Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned the El Sayed Stevens Senate campaign in Michigan, and because I'm a native Michiganian, I kind of keep a close eye on all of that, and I gotta tell you that if El Sayed wins, that's going to be great for the Republican Party in terms of their campaign to convince voters that the Democrats have become radicalized. I don't know what the polling shows there. I was just starting to look that up. But it's a closely watched race, and it's got traditional Jewish Democratic voters in Michigan extremely concerned. No question about that. And it would be interesting to see that if El Sayed becomes the nominee, whether some of those traditional Democratic voters flip and become Republican voters.
Well, that's actually the last thing I wanted to say to you, Gary, is we are flooded at the Republican Jewish Coalition. I've never seen this much interest with people that felt homeless from their party and have now shifted over. I mean, our membership is up, our conferences are selling out, and we're seeing it from all around the country. So there's definitely a shift, and we obviously saw it in the last cycle with the percentage of vote in the swing states. But for sure, that is happening.
You know, I have a friend who is a volunteer lobbyist for AIPAC, has been for many years, and he's a solid Republican, but he acknowledges to me, he has in the past anyway, that when he goes up on the Hill, you get uniform support for Israel from Democrats and Republicans. That's starting to change. Now, some people might say this is a reason to embrace the Democratic Party, but you know, a lot of people who you and I know think otherwise. Thank you, Abby. We'll go to Jim, followed by Steve.
Hey, Gary. Thanks a lot for bringing me up. You know, I was thinking about that, and when you read the citation at the beginning, I started feeling a little bit anxious because about this time recently, you know, the party did that, and you know, Kamala came, and I like Kamala a lot, but I felt like moving too far to the left alienated our center folks in the Democratic Party, of which I'm one of them. It didn't alienate me. It annoyed me that they waited so long, and I was afraid that, you know, there was some foretelling of what was going to happen because of that. But what I'm concerned about, and what makes me a Democratic socialist, is that I see what's happening to our social safety net and programs like IDEA, where there's current litigation, Texas versus Kennedy, which is undermining the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 1970, which is the Rehab Act of 1973 amendment to the Rehab Act of 1954, the amendment of 1973. And if I was confusing anyone saying that, please let me know. But what I worry about is that if we go AOC, I mean, I've heard people go off about AOC, but when I've seen interviews with AOC, she didn't sound crazy to me. I know there may have been some performative things that, as a man who's blind, I may have missed. And there may have been some other things that happened in Congress that I didn't quite understand, or maybe been blown out of proportion. But to me, she seems like she's got her, her stuff together. To me, she's not an idiot. So it would be interesting to see if she goes further on up the ladder in American politics. I'd be interested to see that. There's some other younger leaders, which I think both parties need, but, I mean, with the passing of Lindsey Graham, I think slowly but surely, even the Republicans are realizing that you need to get some more young blood, because if you don't, there's, the party's going to dwindle. So I don't have a lot to say today except for those things, except, like I said, I hope as a moderate that we don't go too far left and scare everybody, and that we do pay attention to the fact that it's great to be the land where business can start up and you can be, whoever or whatever you want to be in a country, and not have either a rigid or, invisible caste system like a lot of countries do. But, man, I would just hope that we don't go too far left, and then we have what happened again, as they say, oh, well, we've learned to deal with crazy. So crazy is what's familiar. And so we really don't want to change. And that's pretty awful, but we've dealt with crazy so much that, I don't know, that I don't want us to become immune and not realize that crazy really is crazy. And if there really is some sanity left in the world, I'm done speaking. Thank you.
No, I think you're correct that the both parties are looking for young blood. They have to look towards the future. The demographics are shifting in the nation. The baby boomers are dying off. There are new ideas. There are more attractive candidates that may be formed more so than substance. There's no question about that. But the issue here is not whether AOC, for example, is intelligent or not. The issue is she espousing philosophies that we would like to see embraced by a future president of the United States, given the polling today, which puts her way out in front among potential candidates for presidential, for the nomination for the Democratic Party for president. Thank you for that, Jim. We'll go to Steve, and then we'll give Marshall a chance to get acclimated and come back to him. Steve.
You figure Marshall Rankin kicked me.
I slightly disagree with the analysis so far, and not really disagree, but I think there's a slight edge to this, and I think the edge is this. I think the Democratic Party, as a party, they started to shift to build coalitions of a lot of different groups that have a lot of different objectives. And I think in a way, because of this, the type of coalitions they're trying to build, that the combined groups find that if they join together and they espouse a given line, that can be a vehicle to what they eventually want to achieve, that they've gained a certain amount of power. Now, the exact amount, I don't know. That to me is an open question. I think there's it's starting to build in the Democratic Party, and what's concerning to me about that is that we have a lot of people in the last 20 or so years that to me, it's like a grievance culture. And, everyone has grievances about things, but to have a grievance without a solution is an issue. And I think that the weakness of some of these people on the far left is they articulate a grievance, but they can't articulate the solution that the grievance needs to achieve or how it's going to be done. It's kind of like that mayor in Seattle was posed a question, if you put this tax on these people, what if they move out? And she kind of chuckled and said, let them move out. Well, they did. And it devastated the downtown office part of Seattle to the point that the vacancy rate is extremely high. Well, what do people do? They went across the river to Bellevue or the coast or whatever there and got away from it. You can have a belief in something, but to have just a belief without an articulate way to convey what your solution is versus what's already here is disconcerting. And I think that's the problem. There's the grievance aspect of it without the solution aspect to it. For instance, I've heard some people, get wound up by ICE, and yeah, ICE has had their troubles. But to say we're going to eliminate ICE and we're going to eliminate the border, okay, what does that look like? I mean, how do these things manifest themselves, and what are you saying, and what kind of effect? These type of things are never thought through well. They're like, let's defund the police. Yeah, okay. 2 a.m, you got a guy kicking down your door, and you call, and there's not a cop to come and see what's going on. That's the solution. But that's where I think this fraction or part of the Democratic Party is trying to drag them off the rails, where anyone with a brain in their head will say, oh, hold it just a second, we can't go there. You want to do these things, and we can see where this is going, but you don't provide a solution. So I think there's the inherent danger is we got a lot of people that's getting into politics with pick your grievance, and they articulate it well to the people that feel like they're part of that group, and they'll nod and they'll say yeah, but there's never solutions in a way that's meaningful or can be put into a budget or can articulate what's that's going to mean to society in general. And I think there's your problem. So I think the Democratic Party, by the nature of how they've run the past 15, 20 years of their coalition, has allowed this to fester, and it's become more prominent. I think it's become more prominent because we're seeing a younger generation that's coming in that has grievances but no solutions. So there's your problem, and I'll leave it there, Gary.
So Steve, you mentioned numerous times that they don't have solutions. They just cry about the problems. But it sounds more to me like that's not really what you're saying. I think what you're arguing is they have solutions, you just don't like the solutions they come up with.
Well, Gary, I mean, a solution that doesn't work, do you call it a solution? Like, for instance, the lady in Seattle that's the mayor that laughed about imposing a tax on the millionaires and the people in the downtown. Well, she proposed it, she implemented it, and the devastation on real estate values in downtown Seattle has just been unheard of. Now, there's your solution in that particular case. Well, do you call a solution that brings economic calamity to your city really a solution, or do you call it a mistake? And that's what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Steve. We'll go to Marshall, followed by Les.
Hey Gary. From my particular observation post from the outside looking in, yeah, it looks like they're encountering what the Republicans encountered when we moved right. It seems like they got a hard left turn in their party, so I don't know what you do with that, but it does seem like they're facing that.
How does that, if in fact is the fact, or even if it's just the perception, affect elections?
It means that on the party primary side, they'll probably have more folks who are progressive, and that may mean that they wind up against either moderate Republicans or Trump folks. And in the case, like my state House rep, a MAGA guy against a DSA guy, you're going to have the extremes versus the extremes, and that doesn't seem like it'll help anybody. But, that's what it seems like it'll do.
So let's put it on a very personal note. You campaign professionally for Republican candidates in Texas. Would it be a gift to your candidates, theoretically, if their opponents were Democratic Socialists?
Yeah, actually it would. They would be, the DSA has some pretty crazy ideas. So yeah, that would be a gift to us.
I'd like to see that in the Rio Grande Valley. I don't see how those kinds of policies resonate to where a candidate such as that can get nominated by the Democrats down there. But, we'll see. As I said earlier before you jumped on the stage, there are some candidates in some areas that are not typically progressive strongholds that are running on Democratic Socialists of America philosophies, even if they don't call themselves DSA members. And, that'll be an indicator if they're successful. It's one thing for someone in the West Coast or Portland or Seattle to get elected on these policies, or here in New York City. It's another thing in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Well, Tulsa may be an exception too, but the rest of Oklahoma. And, it'd be very interesting to see if any of them are successful in their political endeavors. Thank you, Marshall. We'll go to Les, followed by Hanson.
Gary, also, let's just look at what if we had a Bernie Sanders Democratic Social or social democracy, however you frame it. However Bernie would frame something we're going to get of 2016 or even 20. I think it would be different. I think if you had, because Bernie Sanders is not a creature of the cultural left the same way, right? And so it wasn't about Palestine wasn't in some of the identitarian frames that the DSA does. So I think if you had a Bernie Sanders, or Fetterman was close to Sanders for a while, as far as that sort of left-wing populism, or Plattner. You saw Plattner did until we found out he was crazy. I don't know that you couldn't, or the non-identitarians, left-wing sort of populism. I think the problem is more the identity politics, the radical sort of anti-Israel. I think that stuff, the cultural politics, which aren't traditionally a part of a socialist agenda, right? So I think the non-identitarian, non-sort of cultural leftist socialism might do better than you think in Iowa.
I don't know whether Plattner's a good example, because Bernie Sanders is because how he resonated nationally. I think progressive politics is fairly prevalent in Maine, right?
We also have an expert consensus.
Well, I don't know Maine that well. Maine's as Abby was told, Maine's a unique creature, right? So I don't know. But Platter was a left-wing populist for sure.
Isn't the bigger question, Scott, who called him out within his own party? I mean, one of the other issues is when there's the bad egg, do the Dems call it out? The ones that endorse him, like stupidly, like Elizabeth Warren, etc. But when they have a bad one, I've seen Republicans call it out. I cannot remember the election. It was a Senate election. It might have been Louisiana or Alabama. Maybe it was Alabama, where someone was running and there was issues with him. I don't know if it was with molestation or something like that. It was, and I'm blanking on his name. It'll come to me. And you had the Republicans removing themselves from that. The general RNC separated themselves from him, and Republicans called him out. Just one of the questions is, when there's the Plattners and the extremists, look at who's endorsing and who is saying this is just wrong. They did call out the woman in Texas that wanted to put us all in concentration camps. I mean, I think that was a good thing. The majority of them called that out. But have they all called out Plattner?
Well, yeah, no, Abby, that's a problem. And Plattner maybe is a bad example, but I will say Plattner, before we knew how problematic he was closer to sort of Bernie Sanders economic populism than he was to say, I think, Hillary Clinton's, economic friend, right? I mean, I think that's, and again, it would be interesting. Steve Bannon has said this. Steve Bannon said, he was disappointed that Hillary, basically the Democrats sort of put the finger on the scale for Hillary, because he wanted to see a left-wing versus right-wing populist, right? And had Bernie gotten the nomination, you would have seen that, right? You would have seen two populists against each other, a right-wing brand and a left-wing brand, right? Whereas what we got was a right-wing populist, at least rhetorically. We could talk about how populist Trump has governed, and that could be issue by issue, but at least rhetorically in the campaign versus, what is less populist than Hillary Clinton? If you looked up anti-populist on Wikipedia, it would be a big picture of Hillary Clinton, right? And I think Kamala Harris wasn't far behind, right? But again, the problem is we have this left-wing populism that's so culturally alienating. And I think if you had Bernie's left-wing populism in 2016, it would speak to the heartland. Again, Fetterman wasn't far from that when he got elected. Bernie's campaigning with him. But Fetterman wasn't crazy culturally, right? So, these are the issues I think. That is the thing I fear, is I fear that the party, I don't fear the Democratic Party gets dragged to where the DSA is economically. It's not going to happen. Just because, again, the donor class, these people, look at how much, when people used to say to me, Obama's a socialist. I would say, look, Wall Street people don't give money to socialists, okay? The issue is not the economic stuff, it's the cultural stuff. It's that the DSA would infect the party culturally. And then, and you see it now. We talk about Israel a lot, but look at the J Street position now. The J Street position, which used to be sort of like, I hate Netanyahu, but I love Israel. And it's kind of, and I always defend. That's become like a hardcore right-wing position now. That's the most extreme right. That's even untenable now.
What can't even have? No. First of all, they never embraced Israel. But this is not what the room's about. But no, I have a lot to say about J Street. So
okay. Well, let's next.
And by the way, it was Roy Moore that I was thinking of. That Mitch McConnell removed himself from, and the head of the RNC, and the president. Everyone separated themselves from him.
Well, that's why Franken got torpedoed. because it was in response to more and more. Sort of Democrats thought we have to police ourselves, and Franklin was the guy of the hour. But no, I just think that, like, look at Israel, right? And now that, like, with the dance Rahm Emanuel has to do, that is what scares me, is that you'll get this rhetorical stuff becoming mainstream. The abolish the police, it's stuff that I think is never going to happen, but it's stuff that rhetorically infects a party, right? And I think if that sort of rhetoric, those sort of cultural politics become mainstream, that's going to hurt the Democratic Party. Again, I don't think any mainstream Democrat's ever going to be a socialist, just because you're not going to get enough money to get elected. People with money don't want socialism. They try to get elected. But the cultural politics, the limousine liberals buy into that shit sometimes, and that will be the death of the party.
I think one aspect of this that we've not discussed that's very important, or the equation that's now been raised, has to do with Donald Trump. Plattner, every vote for the Democratic Party for the U.S. Senate is so vitally important to the party that they set aside what's right for the expediency, because they are so focused on the possibility of gaining control of the Senate in order to hold Donald Trump in check. And so they tried their best to stay with Plattner as long as they could, until it was so untenable they had no choice. And then they scrambled to determine who would be a palatable candidate who could, in short order, become the nominee, and then potentially the successful candidate in the race. And so I look at the Al-Said situation in Michigan, which just drives so many mainstream Democrats crazy. And I saw an interview with Joe Crowley, the former congressman who got upset by AOC because he didn't have his eye on the ball in his district. Very powerful member of Congress, should not have lost his re-election, but he got primaried out because he wasn't paying attention. And he was interviewed yesterday about Al-Said, and they said, and the interviewer asked him, well, I mean, how can you support a guy like this? And he said, look, Democrats have to keep their eye on the ball.
Well, you know, Republicans learned this lesson, right, Gary, about power. You know, somebody like Lindsey Graham said said about Trump in 2016 when he was running that Trump was a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. And Lindsey Graham changed his tune when it became clear that the xenophobic, race-baiting, religious bigot was going to win the nomination, right? I mean, parties do this, right? And Lindsey Graham,
you know what that's called? You know what that's called? Selling out.
Well,
when I saw Joe Crowley on television yesterday, that live interview, I turned the TV off. I said, this guy's a sellout. And I had a lot of respect for him when he was a congressman here in New York. What a sellout. You mean you can't stay true to your values because the overriding issue is making sure that you regain control of the Senate to put this horrific President Donald Trump in check? So that's more important than standing up for what you truly believe in? So you support somebody who's opposed to your point of view? This is just ridiculous, and this is the problem with party politics right now, Scott.
It's come out quite, in a lot of interviews and stuff, post Lindsey Graham, that this was calculated by Graham, right? That he didn't really change his views necessarily. He just wanted to be relevant and powerful, and thought that he was probably better off closer to the president than far away. So he didn't really change his views on Trump. He just changed the way he dealt with Trump. And so, yeah, parties do this. And you're right. I think it's sad, but it's people are. What is Steve Appel, my friend here? So the number one goal of a politician is to get elected. The number two goal is to get reelected. And so often you see this kind of hypocrisy, or at least a lack of conviction. But you know, this is the nature of the game.
Indeed. Les, followed by Hans.
So I think Mandami is probably the most famous of the Democratic Socialists. And first of all, what got him elected too was that he was media savvy, and his mother is the famous director Mira Neer. So he knows how to present himself and tell a story. But that only takes you so far. You got to do the job. And, you know, these are old ideas. The idea of having government-run grocery stores. And they haven't worked in the last 100 years. And so I don't know what makes them think it'll work in the future. You know, there are ways you could have it done. You could take money from people in New York State, perhaps, and subsidize it. But you know, it's just there's no free lunch. The best way to do things is to you know, do whatever you can do with capitalism, and then use government to fix where capitalism doesn't work. There isn't really a market. And so if you have government grocery stores, why should any other grocery store come in there, or the small mom and pop stay? If they're, you know, being unfairly competed with. If you have housing and you say, we're not going to allow people to make money from their housing, rich people are just going to take their money and invest it someplace else, and there just won't be as much housing stock. You know, there's a competition for capital, and if the local government says you can't make money with housing, then people will invest in something that is more lucrative. So I'm just hoping that with Mr. Mandami, they hold his feet to the fire. Just like I said last week, they should do with Mr. Trump and some of the statements he's made in the past. You know, check on him. Just have newspaper stories, and 3 months from now, just put a, you know, just see how that's going. Yeah, that's my only point. That can tell a good story. He's got some very old ideas that haven't worked in the past that he can make exciting because he knows how to deal with the media. And that is a positive thing for a politician to have. But the other thing is, if you're going to do your job, do your job. I don't see how, displacing half the Jews in the world and driving them into the sea is part of the mandate for the mayor of New York. But it seems to be a bee in his bonnet. Thank you.
So the thing about Mamdani, and I don't want to just focus on him, but of course we're talking about democratic socialist policies here and how they're influencing the mainstream Democratic Party. He proposes things and makes pronouncements when he knows full well they cannot be achieved. So I'll give you an example. He announced that before he got elected, it was part of his platform, free buses for all. And this guy. Everybody wants free buses. He's a great mayor, people tell me now. He's going to give us free buses. Well, the fact is that the bus system in New York City is not run by the city of New York. It's run by the state of New York. And he was in the state legislature. So when he was in the state legislature, if he really wanted free bus service for the people of New York, he would have proposed legislation that would have made that possible. Not that it would have passed, but he would have, said, I believe that there's free bus service, and he would have fought for it. But he did not. He waited until he lacked the authority or ability to influence that, and then claimed that's what he was going to do, knowing full well he could not. And you point out his pronouncements about Israel, and most notably, we're going to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu when he comes to New York City. He knew full well, and finally yesterday he acknowledged he lacked the authority. He knew full well he lacked the authority to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, and furthermore, when he issued a video statement yesterday in which he acknowledged that, but he called upon the United States government to arrest him, he knows that they lack the authority.
Right.
They lack the authority because he's going to be here for the UN General Assembly, and the agreement between the United Nations and the host country is that anybody credentialed arrives and leaves along with their family members unimpeded. That's the agreement. That dates back decades. You do not have the authority, even if you had the desire, as President of the United States even, to arrest the most despotic dictator who comes in September to New York City. You do not have the authority to do this. In fact, the only restrictions that the United States government can put on a UN credentialed diplomat is that you can require that they not travel beyond 25 miles of UN headquarters. That's right. part of the agreement. But that's all the authority you have. So this is all nonsense, and he knows it's nonsense, and yet he espouses it. And the thing is, these idiot voters in New York City, oh wow, this is great, yeah, free Palestine, free buses, etc., and they all think he's doing a great job, and he hasn't done a thing.
Well, let me give you a story I heard. A politician dies and goes to heaven. Okay, I know that sounds improbable, but stay with me. And Saint Peter says, we're feeling in a generous mood today. You get to choose if you want to go to heaven or hell. And he says, where are all my friends? And they said, well, he said, they're in hell. Well, let me try that out for a day. Well, first he tries out heaven for a day, and there's the harps and all that kind of stuff. And then he tries out hell. He goes down the escalator, and he spends a day there, and they're all having a great time, and he gets to play golf with all his buddies, and it's just, he has the time of his life. But he can only stay there for one day, and he has to go back to heaven. And so he goes up the escalator to heaven, and St. Peter says, so do you want to stay in heaven? And he said, no, I like it down there. And he says, as you wish. And he ends up in hell. And it's just, unfortunately, it turns out to be a place of fire and brimstone. And he asked the devil, hey, what happened? He said, well, yesterday was a campaign. Today we're actually governing. And that's the way politicians are.
Exactly. Thank you, Les. We'll go to Anson, followed by William. That's a cute story. Anson.
Ever since 9/11, we started with Bush too, and we had a 8-year administration that was to the left, to the right, but not radically so. And then in come the left-leaning Democrats, but there were not too many screams about socialism and all that stuff. And then in 2016, we all know what happened, and that was a sharp lurch to the right. And then we lurched for 4 years, and then we lurched back to the left, which was further left than Obama had been. And then here we go, another 4 years, and we've lurched back to MAGA on the right, which sometimes borders fascist. And we're going to lurch back to the left. The question is, how far are we going to lurch back in 2028? Where they at least have some fringe elements that talk like and act like communists. Communists versus fascists. I wonder who would win a Stalin and a Hitler election. But my point is, we've been lurching. We have not been smoothly governed, peaceful and progressive, and always on the upward slope of improving the lives and conditions of America. We have tried to put dotted lines and lurch to nirvana, make America great again. And then we're going to lurch in the absolute opposite direction, and government is going to take over. Government's going to run society. They're going to nationalize companies that are going to have government-run healthcare, government-run blah, blah, blah. All that is lurching. And those swings from one election cycle to the other have gotten, in my view, bigger and worse since 9/11. I have always considered myself right of center. And I have not been able to vote for a presidential candidate for the last 3 elections. I had to write them in because I couldn't stand either one of them. Who do you vote for if you've got a Democratic Socialist and you've got a Trump or something even worse than Trump as opposed as in opposition? Who do you vote for? I don't know. I just won't vote, I guess. So the choices, and Scott said something that I thought was profound.